Hello. My name is Talia Greer. Well, I used to be someone's wife, someone's stepmother, someone's afterthought. But tonight, I am the woman who walked out of her own marriage mid-party after handing her husband's ex-wife the keys to his life. The envelope sat in the center of our kitchen table like it belonged there more than I did. Ivory cardstock, heavy to the touch, its edges trimmed with a faint shimmer, subtle enough to seem tasteful, ostentatious enough to deliver a message. Melis never sent anything lightly. Every detail was intentional. Even the ink had a certain arrogance. Cashin used to say we didn't need frills. Our wedding invitations had been printed on simple linen paper, clean, modest, restrained. Minimalist elegance, he called it. No gilded edges. No embossed initials. Just our names, entwined like a promise. This wasn't minimalist. This was performance art. I turned the envelope over in my hand, the texture too smooth, too cool. No return address. No soft curves in the handwriting, only angles. Only control. I slid my finger under the seal slowly, as if something sharp might spring out. Part of me already knew. It wasn't the morning air leaking in through the cracked window that made my skin prickle. It was the line that greeted me when I opened the card. Please dress appropriately, so as not to overshadow Melis. That was it. No Dear Talia. No RSVP. No warmth. Just that. I read it again, out loud this time, thinking maybe hearing it would make it funny, make it less real. It didn't. My voice sounded foreign in the echo of the kitchen. The card felt heavier with each passing second, as though my fingerprints alone were contaminating its curated perfection. My hand trembled. The teacup rattled against the marble counter. I set it down gently, absurdly gently. Everything inside me wanted to slam it into the wall, but I had been taught to be soft, polished, the kind of woman who straightened picture frames instead of shattering them. This wasn't an invitation. It was an eviction notice, dressed in cursive. I wasn't the host. I wasn't even the wife anymore. I was a variable, something to manage, to position, to neutralize. I looked back down at the card. No name, not even mine, not even in passing. Just friends and close family. I wasn't either. I remembered my wedding invitation. Simple, yes, but personal. Cashin Rourke and Talia Greer request the honor of your presence. My name was there. Centered, counted, belonging. This new one. It was a party I was expected to fade into, not attend. I left the card on the counter. I didn't throw it away. Not yet. It hadn't finished its assault. The day moved with a strange viscosity. Not slow like boredom. Slow like dread. Like my limbs were sinking with a grief I couldn't name yet. I replied to emails I didn't remember reading. Returned calls without listening to the voicemails. I folded laundry that had already been folded. It was like I was waiting for something I didn't want to arrive. And then I smelled it. Jasmine. Vanilla. Too sweet. Too staged. The scent of someone who had time to plan their presence. It wasn't mine. I didn't like candles like that. I didn't need to scent mark my home. Or I hadn't. Not until today. I followed it into the living room. She was there. In my living room. Rearranging throw pillows like she lived there. Like she belonged. Melis. My voice cracked. Not loud. Just fractured. Like something breaking under light pressure. She turned. Casual as anything. She wore a cream sweater, perfectly draped. Hair curled in just the right direction, like even her chaos had choreography. She held up a key between two fingers like a magician about to make it disappear. I still had the spare, she said, smiling amused. Cashin said it was easier this way. Easier. That's what I had become, a complication. An obstacle to efficiency. I stared at her, then at the key. Then at her again. I thought we'd change the locks. And then he appeared, like punctuation. Cashin. from the side hallway, buttoning his cuff. Calm. Effortless. She still had it, he said, pouring himself a drink. Don't make this bigger than it is. Don't make this bigger than it is. Words men say when they've already decided how small you're allowed to feel. I didn't answer. What do you say when your husband casually lets someone else rewrite your home? Melis turned to the mirror, adjusted a curl that didn't need adjusting. Don't worry, Talia, she said. I'll make sure the guests feel comfortable. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It never had. It was the kind of smile women give in movies before they kill the lights. Or the brakes. I wanted to scream, to throw the glass in my hand, to demand the truth. But I didn't, because I was raised to be composed, to smooth wrinkles, not cause them. So I stood there, breathing quietly through clenched teeth, watching her rearrange my space like a stylist prepping for her shoot. I didn't know which was louder, the silence in my throat or the roar in my chest. That night I couldn't sleep. I didn't move the envelope. I let it sit on the counter like an open wound. It didn't belong in the trash, but it didn't belong here either. Just like me, I poured myself a glass of red I didn't want, sat on the couch I chose, looked at the fireplace she had styled. Everything I built was being rewritten. Not with violence, with subtle edits, strategic revisions. Melis had always been good at that. Cashin used to joke, she's high maintenance, but high return. I used to think I was the return. Turns out, I was just the upkeep, the part of the budget you cut once the renovation is done. Around midnight, I walked to the door. Locked it, unlocked it, locked it again. The motion felt symbolic, pointless, repeating. The image of the key in her hand burned through me like acid. I had given this house years. My Sundays, my salary bumps, my patience, my name, but not my silence. Not anymore. I picked up the envelope, ran my fingers along the edge, and for the first time I didn't feel hollow. I felt ready. The invitation wasn't mine, but the next move would be. The house felt different the next morning, lighter in the air but heavier in meaning. I moved through it as if my footsteps were too loud for the kind of silence it now carried. It was the kind of silence that clung to the corners, the kind that grows when something important has shifted and no one wants to say it out loud. The memory of that key, gleaming between Melis's fingers, cool and metallic like betrayal itself, echoed behind my ribs. Every time I heard the clink of metal in the distance, I thought it might be her. Sometimes I hoped it was. Sometimes I prayed it wasn't. But deep down I knew part of her had never really left. She had always been here, tucked behind carefully closed doors and polite family smiles, waiting for me to notice just how out of place I'd always been. By late afternoon, laughter drifted down the hallway, bright, sharp, and high-pitched. The kind of laughter that once made the walls feel like home. Now it grated like broken glass. I followed the sound, not because I wanted to join in, but because I needed to know who still had permission to laugh like that. The dining room came into view, glowing with the golden haze of sunset. Jude was on the floor, legs crossed, a mess of crayons and torn paper surrounding him. He was drawing, stick figures under a blue sky. 3 of them. His little tongue peeked out in concentration, his brow furrowed in serious joy. He looked up and smiled when he saw me. "Miss Anna, are you staying for dinner?" It hit me like a slap. I blinked. For a second, I thought he was teasing me. I smiled, instinctively, reflexively. That kind of smile you wear when your heart drops and you don't want anyone to hear it land. "It's Talia, sweetheart," I said, crouching down to his level, though everything in me wanted to stand tall and unshaken. He tilted his head, confused. "Mom said you're going on a trip, so I should call you Miss Anna again until you come back." Trip. That word was chosen with care, like every word Melis ever used. My throat tightened, but I nodded slowly. Did she now? She said this house used to be ours. Jude continued, returning to his drawing. So it's kind of funny you live here now. Funny. The word scraped. I wanted to correct him. Wanted to scream that this was my house, that I had stayed when everyone else had run. But he was just a child. Children don't lie. They just echo the truths whispered around them like bedtime stories. I reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind his ear, the same way I used to when he was small and scared of the dark. Sometimes people borrow houses, Jude, I said softly, and sometimes they forget to give them back. He smiled, like I had told him something magical. And maybe I had. Then from down the hallway, Cashin's voice called out, sharp and hollow. Dude! Wash up. Guests are coming soon. Guests. The word curled in the air like smoke. I stood, smoothing the front of my dress, pretending my knees weren't trembling. Jude gathered his crayons like a soldier packing for battle, utterly unaware of the one already being fought in the walls around him. The kitchen was filled with a soft clatter when I entered. Glass, silverware, a hum of conversation. The smell of roasted chicken mingled with a perfume I didn't recognize, floral, expensive, not mine. Isolde stood at the counter, holding a wine bottle by its neck like it was a weapon. Or a trophy. Oh, Talia, she said with a too-wide smile. We're opening Melis's favorite vintage. You don't mind, do you? Her voice was thick with syrup. Every syllable landed with the weight of something passive-aggressive wrapped in lace. Cashin stood nearby, sleeves rolled up, fiddling with a dish towel like it could shield him from the tension. Of course not, I replied. Why would I? My voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes when you realize the people around you have already decided what role you're meant to play, and it's not the one you thought. And then she entered. Melis floated in like she owned the oxygen. Her smile was effortless, her dress perfectly unwrinkled. She kissed Isolde on the cheek and touched her arm gently, like nothing had ever been fractured. You always knew my palate, Melis said, eyes twinkling. Isolde giggled like a schoolgirl. Only you could keep this family's taste so classic. Cashin chuckled at them. Not at me. I took my seat at the far end of the table. It hadn't been set for me, but I sat anyway. The plates were white porcelain, the silverware polished to a mirror finish. It was all perfectly arranged, symmetrical, deliberate. Except for me. They talked like I wasn't there. About the event. About lighting. About the new florist. Not once did my name pass between their lips. I could have been a coat rack for all the space I was allowed to occupy. 15 minutes passed before I realized I hadn't said a single word. My fork scraped across the plate with a sound that should have interrupted them. But it didn't. And then Jude. Sweet, unsuspecting Jude burst in, a storm of childhood joy. He ran straight to Melis and climbed into her lap with the ease of a son who never questioned whose arms would catch him. Mom, can I show you my drawing? Of course, baby, she said, pulling him close. Isolde clapped. Look at that. Just like old times. Cashin smiled. Feels right, doesn't it? Old times. Their words hit like sleet on bearskin. Sharp. Cold. Familiar. It was then I understood. This wasn't forgetfulness. It wasn't carelessness. This was design. This was Melis's art, restoring what she thought the family was before I entered it. This wasn't nostalgia. It was erasure. I looked around the table. Laughter, wine, the glow of chandeliers above heads bowed in shared memory. But none of it belonged to me. The air smelled like rosemary chicken and freshly polished silver. I lifted my glass of water and drank, slowly. My hands were steady now. The kind of steady you get when the storm is no longer a surprise. I wasn't forgotten. I was being rewritten. Isolde raised her glass, eyes gleaming in the light. To family, she said, her gaze sliding past me like I was a vase. To the ones who truly understand us. I didn't raise mine. I didn't need to. The toast was never meant for me. The laughter from Isolde's toast was still ringing in my ears when the conversation shifted outside. Someone suggested fresh air. Another followed the sound of a violin warming up on the patio. I trailed behind the group, not because I wanted to, but because standing still would have drawn more attention. The garden looked beautiful, warm lights strung between the magnolias, glasses catching the last glow of dusk. It should have felt romantic. It felt staged. Maylie stood in the middle of it all, like she was being lit from within. She had always known how to face an audience. "Do you remember, Cashin?" she said, loud enough for every guest to hear. "That night under this very tree. You were so nervous. Your hands were shaking when you opened the box." Someone gasped softly. Cashin smiled the way men smile when they've been caught in nostalgia. "You told me you liked emerald cut," he said. "I couldn't let anyone else get it first." Everyone laughed. My chest didn't. I gripped the edge of the table to keep my hand from trembling. The words emerald cut burned through the air. I remembered asking once, years ago, if he ever considered a green stone for my ring. "Too unconventional," he'd said. "We're not that kind of couple." I stared down at my wine glass. The reflection of the string lights shimmered across its surface, fractured and trembling. "He even practiced what he'd say," Melis continued. "He wanted it to be perfect." Perfect. That was the word she'd always owned. The group applauded, some wiping at their eyes, as if they'd witnessed a love story instead of a theft. Cashin didn't correct her. He didn't say, "That was another lifetime." He just stood there, nodding slightly, like remembering hurt less than truth. I could still see the cheap pizza box from the night he proposed to me. We were in the living room, TV flickering blue shadows across his face. "Let's make it official," he said, handing me a small box he hadn't even wrapped. The ring had been 2 weeks late. He blamed shipping delays. I blamed myself for expecting more. Now, standing there, I realized how well she knew the script. He hadn't changed his lines. He'd only changed his leading lady. My fingers curled around the napkin in my lap, twisting it slowly, silently, tightly. She got the version of him I was never allowed to ask for. A breeze moved through the garden, carrying the smell of champagne and night-blooming jasmine. Melis rested her hand on Cashin's shoulder. He didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even remember to look my way. End of scene 1. The lights from the garden followed us inside. The house looked cleaner than it ever had, which made it colder. The table was set again, this time for the tasting of the main courses. A coordinator moved around with her clipboard, smiling nervously. "All right," she said. "We'll begin with the appetizer selections. The main will follow shortly." I searched the place cards. Mine was there, but the printed menu in front of it was missing. Everyone else had one. "Excuse me," I said to the coordinator. "I think my copy." Before she could answer, Cashin spoke. "I told them to remove the sea bass. Melis can't be near shellfish." I blinked. "We agreed on sea bass weeks ago." He gave me that calm, patronizing look I knew too well. "It's not a big deal, Talia. We'll pick something else." I leaned back, keeping my voice even. "We already paid the deposit for seafood." He smiled, the kind of smile meant to quiet a child. "Melis has a reputation for her palate. It would have looked bad if we ignored that." I felt every eye around the table turned toward me. Looked bad for who? Silence. Cashin took a sip of wine. "It's not about you." Melis, graceful as ever, reached for her glass. "I'm sure your ideas were lovely, Talia. But this party, it's about the guests." I wanted to laugh, or scream, or both. But instead I stared at the silver tray between us, the reflection of her face gleaming beside my own. One of us looked composed. One of us looked like a ghost. Delaney sat beside me, pretending to adjust her napkin. She didn't meet my eyes. She never did when the truth got loud. The coordinator cleared her throat. "We'll switch to the filet option then." "Perfect," Cashin said. Millie smiled. Always better simple and elegant. Simple. Elegant. Erased. The room filled with the clatter of forks and meaningless laughter. No one noticed that I hadn't touched my food. The smell of roasted meat turned metallic in my nose. Even the menu had her initials. MV Collection. I hadn't seen it before, but of course she'd branded her preferences. Even the food bore her name. I folded my napkin and placed it on the table. The fabric felt heavier than it should have. My chair slid back, its legs scraping the tile, a small, sharp sound that cut through their conversation. Cashin looked up finally, irritated. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Nowhere," I said, just remembering what appetite feels like. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't know one. The hallway had never felt that long before. Every portrait on the wall, every smiling face, every golden frame, seemed to lean toward me, whispering secrets I wasn't supposed to hear. My steps were slow, deliberate, quieter than breath. I wasn't sneaking. I was remembering how to vanish. The house had its own kind of silence that night, a rehearsed, expensive silence, the kind made of money and shame. From the foyer came a faint hum of conversation and crystal glasses. Someone was laughing softly. Melise, probably. Her laugh had that newness, that practiced shimmer of a woman who still believed she was being adored. And then I saw it. A box on the side table. Neat. Centered. Wrapped in a thin layer of plastic that glimmered under the low light. Thank you cards. That was all it took. The smallest, cleanest betrayal. I stood there, staring, as if the air had thickened around me. I didn't touch it at first. I just looked. The font, the seal, the perfect corners. It was beautiful in the way a scalpel is beautiful, balanced, gleaming, meant for cutting. My fingers broke the seal. Inside, a stack of identical cards, their weight almost ceremonial. I pulled one free. Cream paper, gold ink, embossed floral edges that felt like tiny, perfect scars beneath my thumb. With gratitude, from Cashin and Melise. My breath didn't even catch. It was too controlled for that. I just stared at the letters, their quiet confidence, their finality. It was elegant, yes. Tasteful. Final. A clean erasure. The room seemed to shrink around me. My pulse slowed until I could hear nothing but the faint ticking of the clock above the mantel, a sound that had once grounded me, now counting down something I couldn't yet name. I remembered our first cards, Cashin and I, years ago, our names pressed together like a promise. We had spent 3 nights debating fonts and finishes. He'd said our names should look like they belonged together. I believed him. Now my name was gone, not misspelled, not forgotten, removed. Subtracted. A quiet execution written in gold. I turned the card over, searching for myself like a fool. Maybe on the back, maybe in a small line, with love from our home, or from Talia too. But there was nothing, just the texture of paper against skin, and the sound of something breaking that no one else could hear. I clutched the card the way one holds a condolence letter, gently, as if the grief might spill if I held it too hard. Because that's what it was, a sympathy for the living ghost of this house. Behind me, a soft flicker. The light stuttered, once, twice. Talia! I didn't turn. His voice used to fill rooms. Now it only filled the empty space where love had been. I was going to tell you, Cashin said. His tone was measured, calm. That calmness he used as a weapon. I held up the card. This was intentional. He stepped closer. The faint clink of ice in his glass punctuated his breath. He smelled of bourbon and some cologne that didn't belong to our life. It's just a placeholder, he said. You're overreacting. I smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. My name isn't a placeholder. He sighed, as though the conversation had already exhausted him. Don't do this, Talia. Not in front of guests. Not in front of who? Not in front of her. The words sliced through the air like a blade. He didn't even flinch when he said it. I turned, slowly. The hallway light cast him in amber, softening the cruelty in his face until it almost looked like reason. "You're embarrassing me," he added. The absurdity of it nearly made me laugh. I was the embarrassment, not the erasure, not the betrayal written in gold leaf, but me. For a moment, I thought about saying something cruel, something that would land an echo. But cruelty was his language, not mine. I looked down at the card again, turned it once more in my hand. It didn't change. Neither did he. Silence swelled between us, heavy and deliberate. I walked to the kitchen, not fast, not slow, just steady. I set the card on the marble island, perfectly centered. A new centerpiece, a new truth. He followed, but he didn't touch me. "Talia," he said softly, "you're making this harder than it needs to be." I looked up at him. His face was tired, but not sorry. He wanted convenience, not conscience. "Then maybe," I whispered, "I should stop being seen altogether." He blinked, almost as if the sentence didn't make sense to him. And then I left. The living room was full of laughter when I reached it, the kind that fills every corner and leaves no air for grief. Maylie stood by the fireplace, radiant in something gold, the same shade as the ink that had erased me. She was telling a story about their trip to Venice, her hand brushing Cashin's arm in that casual way new lovers use when they're still learning each other's language. No one looked up when I entered. That was the point. I stood there, invisible, the ghost of the hostess I used to be. The woman who planned, arranged, smiled. The woman who kept everything polished, including her pain. Cashin turned slightly, caught my reflection in the mirror behind the bar. His eyes flickered, not guilt, not remorse, just discomfort. A reminder that ghosts don't belong in photographs. I could have walked up to her. I could have said something venomous and theatrical, demanded my name back, my dignity, my space. But all that would have done was feed the story they were already telling, the unstable ex-wife who couldn't let go. No, I wasn't going to play that role anymore. I walked past them, past the polite laughter, the hum of admiration, the clinking glasses. Each sound was a nail sealing the coffin of my old life. In the reflection of the window, I saw myself, pale, still, a figure fading at the edges. For the first time, I didn't hate that. Fading meant freedom. I slipped my shoes off at the back door. The night air was cold, clean, untouched by their noise. The grass felt damp beneath my feet, grounding. Inside, their voices carried, muffled now, like echoes from another life. The stars were faint, but visible. I looked up, exhaled. The air trembled in my throat. It was strange, realizing you've already left long before you walk away. Later, when the guests had gone and the laughter had dissolved into the dull hum of the refrigerator, I returned to the hallway. The box of cards still sat on the table, untouched since I'd opened it. I stared at it one last time. It wasn't anger I felt. It wasn't even heartbreak. It was something cleaner, the clarity that comes when you finally accept you're no longer fighting for a place that doesn't want you. The point of no return isn't loud. It doesn't crash or burn. It just clicks, quietly. And once it does, you can't unhear it. He didn't follow me. That was the part that stayed with me most. Not the silence. Not the way the porch light caught the edge of my cheek as I left. Not even the way the night swallowed the sound of my keys as I gripped them too tightly in my hand. It was that he didn't follow. Didn't ask. Didn't protest. Just watched. Like someone letting go of a balloon they hadn't realized they were holding. Not because they cared, but because the air had gone out of them. The next morning, the sunlight came in like an interrogation, sharp, invasive. It sliced through the blinds in rigid lines and cast long shadows across the wood floor like prison bars drawn in light. I stood barefoot in front of the full-length mirror, holding the red dress up to my body. The same red dress Cashin had once admired. 3 weeks ago. A different lifetime. You should wear this, he'd murmured, brushing non-existent lint from the shoulder with the kind of care that disguised control. It brings out your fire. At the time, I believed him, or wanted to. Now, I wasn't so sure whose fire he meant, mine, or the one he hoped to control. But I put it on anyway. Not for him, not even out of defiance. For me. Because sometimes wearing the lie out loud is the only way to remind yourself what the truth used to feel like before it got dressed in someone else's intentions. Downstairs, the house was unnaturally quiet, the kind of quiet that holds its breath. In the study, I reached for my phone but paused. Cashin's iPad blinked on the desk. One notification. Just one. I didn't mean to open it. I didn't plan to. But my finger moved on its own, an instinct trained from too many almost truths and half-lies. A muscle memory of betrayal. The screen unlocked with ease. And then it was there. The message. You've always looked best in red. Melis. Her name hovered like smoke above the words. A timestamp etched into the past. March. My birthday was in April. The realization didn't hit me like a punch. It didn't even sting. It settled in quietly, like dusk creeping into a room you didn't notice had grown dark. I stood there, staring at the message, then at my reflection in the dark screen. I touched the fabric of the red dress, tried to remember how it had looked in the store window, bright, proud, untouched, draped on a mannequin with open arms like it was welcoming the world. Now it clung to me like a borrowed story. Even my reflection felt like something someone else had worn first. I closed the iPad gently, like tucking a child into bed. A lie, safely asleep. Evening arrived dressed in performance. The backyard had been transformed into something magazine-worthy, string lights draped like starlight, round tables topped with soft floral centerpieces, candles flickering inside hurricane glass. Music floated in the background, soft jazz, curated charm. It looked like a celebration, felt like an audition. Cashin stood near the bar, his sleeves casually rolled, laughing with someone I didn't recognize. His posture was practiced. Just enough smile. Just enough humility. When he spotted me, his eyes traveled the length of the dress like it was a calculation. I walked toward him, calm, unhurried, deliberate. Why red? I asked. He blinked, a beat too slow. What? I repeated the question, quieter this time. Why tell me to wear red? He hesitated. His face remained still, but the skin around his eyes tightened. A flicker of something passed through him. Not guilt. Strategy. I saw the message, I said before he could recompose. A pause. Then his jaw shifted. He exhaled. Not like someone who felt caught, but like someone irritated at being interrupted. Talia, he said, voice low and condescending. Don't make tonight about your feelings. As if I was the problem. As if my betrayal was in feeling, not his in lying. She'll be here soon, he added. Be cheerful. Or we're done. There it was. The contract. Finally laid bare. No negotiation. No grace. Just a clause with consequences. I looked past him at the party, the carefully arranged tables, the perfect playlist that I had picked, the lights I had hung, the house I had helped build brick by invisible brick. This wasn't a marriage. It was a production. And I was the understudy who'd never been told I was replaceable. But the spotlight didn't scare me anymore. I smiled. Not out of joy, not even out of irony, but because something inside me had finally stopped clinging to the stage. Cashin waited, watched for a reaction. But I had already given mine. I turned, my heels clicking across the stone path like punctuation. Not a period, not an exclamation. A closing statement. No door slammed, no drink thrown. Just silence. Behind me, the music shifted. I didn't recognize the song. It didn't matter. In the bathroom, I stared at myself again. The dress looked different now. Not like armor, not like surrender, just fabric, a symbol stripped of meaning. I wiped off my lipstick slowly, like peeling away a mask. My eyes were dry, clear. In the mirror, I didn't look like someone broken. I looked like someone deciding. Later, alone in the guest room that had somehow become mine, I opened the drawer where I'd hidden the envelope. The lawyer's card sat on top. I hadn't made the call yet, but tonight was the final warning. Not from him, from me. A line had been crossed, and I was done playing understudy to a role I never auditioned for. If you'd been listening outside the house, you might have heard laughter, glasses clinking, music, celebration. But upstairs, beneath it all, there was a quiet sound, the whisper of a zipper, a dress coming off, a woman deciding what she wouldn't wear again. Because sometimes the final act isn't loud. Sometimes it's just the moment you stop pretending you don't see the truth and walk toward the version of yourself that always did. The song drifted behind me like smoke from a fire I hadn't noticed until the room was already too warm. A language I couldn't name anymore wrapped itself around the melody, sweet, sad, and slow. It tugged at something in my bones, but not my heart. My heart had been repurposed for endurance. Around me, bodies shimmered in formal wear, laughter sparked like firecrackers, and eyes flitted past me like I was a stain on their evening. The floor beneath me clicked with each step, my heels tapping not to the rhythm of the music, but to the pulse of something more ancient. Rage, maybe, or revelation. I didn't walk toward the bar because I was thirsty. I walked because I needed somewhere to anchor myself. The crowd made me feel like I was floating, like I wasn't fully in my body anymore. And then I saw it, framed in silver, gleaming like something divine. Cashin and Maylis, their wedding photo. He, regal and sculpted in his tux. She, ethereal in her lace gown, eyes upturned, lips parted in a practiced laugh. The kind that makes people comment, "They're such a beautiful couple." The kind that gets shared, printed, mounted. The kind that mocks you if you've ever believed you had something, even close to love. I leaned in. Not a smudge on the glass. Not a wrinkle in the tablecloth. This display, this altar, had been curated. For admiration. For envy. For erasure. I saw myself reflected, barely, in the corner of the frame. Out of focus. Out of place. My wedding photo had never left the hard drive. Buried inside a folder labeled miscellaneous. Not even us. Not even wedding. Just data. A digital afterthought. I remember the conversation as clearly as I remember the silence that followed it. "Why don't we print one?" I'd asked him once, naive in my hope. "Printed photos are pretentious," he'd replied, with the same shrug he gave to most things I cared about. But this wasn't pretentious, apparently. This was polished, celebrated, permanent. My hands didn't tremble. My lips didn't part. But inside, something old and breathing gave its final sigh. A quiet death. Not of love, but of delusion. Maylis floated past me just then, like an actor in her mark. Her perfume was a weapon, jasmine with a whisper of powder. She didn't look at me. She didn't have to. She had already conquered the room. Her scent lingered like a brand. I reached for the frame. Not to shatter it. Not yet. But to move it 3 degrees off center. Just enough to unbalance the symmetry. Just enough to reclaim something. Not power, maybe, but space. Air. A right to stand in a room that had been engineered to suffocate me. Out back, the night was staged for charm. Fairy lights dangled from trees, flickering like lies told too many times. The laughter here was softer, controlled. I spotted Jude near the hedges, his small legs swinging from a wooden bench. A plate of shrimp crackers balanced on his lap. He beamed when he saw me, waved like nothing had fractured. I moved toward him, careful. The hem of my dress brushed fallen petals from the ground. "You look pretty," he said. half a cracker in his mouth, the other half crumbling in his hand. "Thanks, buddy." My voice didn't betray me. My soul, on the other hand, was curled up behind my ribs, howling. He wiped his sticky fingers on his pants and scanned the crowd. "Mom said you were going on a trip soon, so she could come back. Is that true?" I stopped breathing. For just a moment. The world didn't spin, it cracked. He wasn't being cruel. He didn't even know the words he'd been given were loaded. He was a child, my child, but already trained in their version of the truth. I reached out and tucked his hair behind his ear like I had done since he was born. That small, sacred gesture no one had taken from me. Yet, some homes, I said gently, only have room for one mother, sweetheart. His brow furrowed. He didn't understand, but he felt the shift. He was smart like that, sensitive, which meant he'd carry this moment longer than he'd show. "I thought," he began, but I kissed his temple before he could finish. Not to silence him, to stop myself, because if I heard the rest I might scream, or beg, or break. The house had already started teaching him things I'd spent years protecting him from. I stood, smoothed my dress, and walked back inside like a soldier who just buried her last comrade. The music had softened. Strings now. Something classical. Expensive. Tasteful. Distant. I moved through the house like a shadow with a mission. Past the catering staff with practiced smiles. Past vases filled with flowers I hadn't chosen. Past the silver-framed truth they'd flaunted as if I weren't standing right there. To the study. A quiet room in a loud house. I closed the door behind me. The click echoed like punctuation, like the end of a sentence no one had noticed I'd been writing. I sat at the desk. Familiar wood, familiar dust. Cashin's office, but never mine. Except now. Now, it was mine for exactly as long as I needed. I opened the laptop. His. Of course. He didn't lock it. He never believed I'd do anything that wasn't passive. And that was his first mistake tonight. The screen came alive. Desktop files stared back at me. His world. His secrets. But I wasn't here for memories. I opened a browser. Typed a name into the search bar. Rowan Beck. And hit enter. The name lit up the screen like a lighthouse in the dark. Rowan Beck. I stared at it like it was the last match in a blackout. Tiny, flickering, dangerous. The kind of danger that comes with truth. I didn't call. Not yet. I closed the laptop with a softness that betrayed the sharpness inside me. The party buzz in the background had turned into a distant hum, laughter muffled through walls, glasses clinking like they belonged to someone else's life. I crossed the hallway silent, a phantom in my own story. Each step felt like peeling away from skin that no longer fit. The bedroom smelled like linen and lavender, Cashin's chosen calm. A curated piece, like everything else. I opened the closet, searching for a scarf, a habit born of instinct more than cold. Instead, my fingers brushed something foreign. Gold. Straps. Delicate. A whisper of perfume I didn't own. Not mine. I pulled them out. Heels. High-end. The kind that aren't worn to walk, just to be seen in. One had a scuff on the toe, barely visible unless you were looking for it. Mélisse. I didn't need confirmation. The truth had a texture. These shoes matched it perfectly. My throat didn't tighten. My stomach didn't drop. I had run out of surprise. I placed the shoes in the center of the bedroom floor. Not as a threat, not as a message. Just as evidence. I snapped a photo. Emailed it to myself. Subject line, proof. For me. Cashin once told me to move my shoes to the guest closet. Minimalism in the entryway, he said. More curated. Curated was his word for erasure. His need to control the visual, the narrative, the woman. And now, she had placement. I had clearance. The morning after wasn't heavy. It was hollow. Like a house after everything's been packed, but before the movers arrive. I brewed coffee. Not because I wanted it, but because muscle memory doesn't know heartbreak. I set the table. Plates, forks, rituals with no meaning left. I heard him laughing in the other room. A full-body kind of laugh, the kind you forget people are capable of when they've gone cold with you. Maybe it was Delaney. Maybe someone new. At that point, the cast didn't matter. The play had already ended for me. Delaney appeared in the doorway, her heels tentative. She used to knock. That habit died the day she learned silence bought her more access than truth ever did. You've seen it, haven't you? I asked without turning. She hesitated. Then, Talia, this isn't. You've seen it, I repeated, louder, sharper. She dropped her gaze, her fingers tugging the hem of her sleeve. It's not my place. I turned to her. It was once, when you stood beside me in that church, when you adjusted my veil and told me I looked like power and peace. Her eyes shimmered, but didn't spill. I can't afford to lose Cash and Circle. That sentence, delivered like a confession, but it felt like a betrayal. Then don't pretend you're still in mine. The air between us broke into something jagged. She laughed quietly. No door slam. Just distance. I didn't follow. Not this time. By mid-afternoon, rain tapped the windows, steady and soft. Like the kind of sadness you can't cry out. I pulled the leather notebook from the back of the closet. My father's. The last thing I had of him that felt untouched. His handwriting was inside, tilted and purposeful. A note folded so neatly it felt sacred. If they ever ask you to silence your pain to preserve their peace, walk away. That's when you need your voice most. I read it once. Then again, slower. It wasn't advice. It was permission. All these years, I had mistaken endurance for strength. Now I knew better. I picked up the phone. No hesitation this time. I dialed Rowan Beck. His voice came through, lower than I remembered. Rougher. Like time had carved into it. Talia! He said my name like it belonged somewhere safe. I think it's time, I said. A pause. For what? For me to stop making peace with people who wage war quietly. He didn't ask questions. He never had to. Rowan was the kind of man who read beneath words. I'll be in the city next week, he said. Want to meet? I let the silence stretch, not from doubt, but from decision. Yes. We didn't say goodbye. Some connections don't end. They just pause. That evening, I started packing, not to leave, but to choose. Every drawer held something that told a version of my story I didn't recognize anymore. The curated version. The quiet girl. The accommodating woman. I folded clothes into boxes, but it wasn't fabric I was sorting. It was fragments. What was mine? What was his? What was never really ours? I found the necklace Cashin gave me our first year, tucked into the back of the jewelry box. Still in its velvet case. Still cold. Still unused. I left it on his pillow. Not as a message. Not as a weapon. Just as a return. Night fell quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a long-held scream. I stood by the window, watching the city breathe beneath the rain. No plans. No scripts. No apology rehearsed for anyone else's comfort. Just the truth. And the truth was this. I was not fragile. I was just tired of being careful. Tomorrow, they'd ask what changed. But they'd never understand. This was never a war of fists. It was always a war of silence. A war of rewrites. And this time I had the pen. The line disconnected before I heard his voice. Rowan's name still glowed on my phone, a quiet promise waiting to be spoken. I didn't need to hear confirmation. I already knew what would come next. The party. The faces. The end. By evening, the estate was alive again, lights blazing, glasses clinking, music swelling louder than any apology ever could. Guests filled every room like fog, familiar and meaningless all at once. I moved through them slowly, the red dress hugging me like armor I hadn't realized I'd forged. Every "you look lovely tonight" sounded like an echo of a lie too old to correct. The bell rang. Once. Sharp, clean, final. A hush rolled across the room like a ripple. Even the music faltered. I didn't rush. I didn't falter. I walked to the door the way someone walks toward their verdict. When I opened it, Maylee stood framed in the doorway, wrapped in a halo of porch light. Perfect makeup, polished confidence, the same perfume that clung to every betrayal. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Two women, one history rewritten by another's hand. Then I smiled, a quiet, deliberate smile. "He's all yours." It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. My voice carried the kind of weight silence gives when it's earned. Behind me, I could feel the room stiffen, the subtle shift of bodies pretending not to hear what they all knew had been said. The music choked, faltered, and died mid-beat. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered my name like a warning too late to matter. I stepped aside, walked past her, out the door. This wasn't retreat. This was release. The air outside was thick with jasmine and expensive wine. I heard my heels click against the driveway, each sound sharper than the last. Behind me, the door opened again. I didn't turn. "Mrs. Greer," a voice said softly. "Mr. Halston." Silver hair, kind eyes, the kind of man who'd seen more endings than beginnings. He caught up to me, breath even, calm as a sermon. "My wife left me 30 years ago," he said. "I wish I'd left first." I glanced sideways. The honesty in his voice hit me harder than pity ever could. He nodded toward the glowing windows. "Your silence tonight, that was the loudest truth in that house." We stood there together, neither speaking. The kind of quiet that doesn't demand sound because it's already full. "Some exits," I said finally, "aren't escape. They're declarations." He smiled faintly. "Then I hope they were listening." We both knew they weren't. The door behind us creaked open again. Melissa's heels on stone. I felt her before I saw her. "Talia!" she called, voice dripping with something rehearsed. Halston lifted a hand without looking back. "Don't." She froze, half caught between victory and embarrassment. He turned to me instead, tipped his head once, a silent salute, and walked toward his car. I made it halfway down the driveway before she spoke again. "He never stopped loving me." The words floated through the dark, soft and venomous. I turned, slowly. She stood under the porch light, trembling between triumph and desperation. Her lipstick smudged where the night had finally stopped serving her. I met her gaze. Steady. Still. "Then I hope you enjoy what that love looks like now." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been said years ago. I walked to my car, opened the door, sat down. The seat was cool against my back, grounding me in the present. I started the engine. The hum filled the silence she'd left behind. I didn't speed. I didn't flinch. The driveway curved into darkness, but for once, I wasn't afraid of where it led. Freedom isn't loud. It doesn't shout or slam. It hums quietly in the space where control used to live. She didn't win. He didn't win. I just stopped playing their game. My phone lit up on the passenger seat, screen glowing like an ember. One message from Rowan. "Everything's ready. Just say the word." The message glowed from my phone like a quiet dare. "Everything's ready. Just say the word." I didn't respond. Not yet. I watched the screen fade to black and set it face down on the table. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was full. Full of memory, consequence, breath held too long, and finally let go. That night, I slept without locking the bedroom door. It wasn't trust. It wasn't hope. It was surrender, the quiet kind. The kind where you stop resisting, not because you've given up, but because the storm has passed and all that's left is debris. 1 week passed. The party had long since ended. So had the pretending. The house, once so meticulously curated, now sat hollow. The laughter, the music, the careful lighting, all gone like expensive illusions that no longer paid rent. What remained was dust on glass tables, wine stains on linen, and the faintest trace of Melis's perfume in the guest room closet. A single earring lay on the floor beneath the guest bed. I didn't pick it up. On Monday, Rowan came. He didn't knock. He knew his way in. Pressed shirt, slate tie, that expression he wore like armor, emotionless but not cruel. He handed Cashin the envelope like it was a business card. "You've been served," he said, like he was noting the weather forecast. Calm, unapologetic. Cashin sat at the island, the same stool where he'd once laughed too loudly over things that weren't funny. He didn't flinch. He didn't ask. He read the letter, blinked once, and set it down like it was a receipt from a restaurant he didn't remember dining at. "She already filed the quitclaim," Rowan added, almost like an afterthought. "You have 21 days to vacate." The silence after that wasn't confusion. It was clarity, like the moment after a lightning strike when everything smells like metal and ozone. I stood at the edge of the hallway, unseen but not invisible. I didn't hide. I watched him absorb it. He never screamed. Not once. But losing everything he never noticed he had, that was louder than rage. I was watering my basil on the windowsill when I saw the headline. The sun was soft that morning. The air was cool and honest. Nonprofit leader under federal investigation. The photo was unmistakable. Melis, in one of her PR-curated portraits, white teeth, sharp blazer, smile rehearsed to perfection. But under the headline, the cracks had finally shown. Financial inconsistencies, misallocated funds, misleading reports to donors. The language was clinical. The consequences were not. Her name was removed from the board within 3 days. The comment section below the article turned her into both villain and meme. Some said it was jealousy. Others said it was inevitable. None of them knew her the way I did. But I didn't smile. I didn't gasp. I just kept watering. Slowly, quietly, steadily. The basil had grown wild in the spring warmth. It had needed pruning weeks ago, but I hadn't had the heart. There was something about watching it take over the windowsill, unapologetic, fragrant, alive, that made me feel less like I was surviving and more like I was becoming. She once told me at brunch, fork balanced in midair, "Perception is the new reality, darling. People believe what you show them." She said it like a prayer, like a prophecy. But now, reality had come to collect. With subpoenas, with spreadsheets, with broken trust. Her empire, built on curated empathy and Instagram philanthropy, crumbled audit by audit. It didn't fall like a tower. It eroded like sand beneath a wave. She taught me how to perform, but I remembered how to live. I closed the article and returned to my basil. My hands smelled like earth, like truth. The plant didn't ask for applause. It just kept growing. Spring arrived differently this year. Not with fireworks, but with soft insistence. Like the world had been holding its breath and finally decided to exhale. I took the long path through the park, the one lined with elm trees, where the benches were cracked but sturdy. The air smelled like new things. The kind of smell that doesn't shout, but hums. And that's where I saw them. Cashin, slouched, thinner now, as if someone had drained the color out of him. Melis beside him, scrolling on her phone, her face lit by a different kind of screen glow. He said something. She didn't look up. They didn't see me. Jude wasn't with them. I didn't stop walking. I didn't wave. I didn't hide. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel pity. I felt distance. The good kind. The earned kind. The kind you build like a fence around your peace, not to keep people out, but to keep yourself in. Because peace isn't silence. Peace is when the noise no longer owns you. When I got home, the wind chimes on my balcony were swaying gently. Not in chaos, not in warning, just dancing. I poured a glass of tea, the same blend I used to make for both of us. But now it was just mine. And it was enough. The light shifted on the wall in that slow, golden way only late afternoons understand. I watched it stretch and bend, claiming space. No one clapped. No one needed to. I had survived without making a scene. I had walked out and stayed gone. The house wasn't empty. It was quiet, and quiet is not the same as hollow. It was full of breath, of presence, of space reclaimed. I was not who I used to be, and that was the point. We often believe the final act of strength has to be loud, a confrontation, a slam of the door, a declaration. But sometimes it's the softest exit that speaks the loudest. Not because the world is watching, but because you finally are. And when the house goes quiet, you finally hear yourself again. Sometimes, peace doesn't come from being right. It comes from being done. You don't have to slam the door to leave a room that no longer sees you. Have you ever walked away from something that looked perfect from the outside, but felt like a quiet war inside? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story echoed even a sliver of your truth, subscribe for more. The next one might just be the chapter you've been waiting to hear.